Starting in the 1840s, the American dream was tied to a team of mule or oxen and these fragile wooden wagons. On these bumpy, dusty trails, there were no guarantees. The graves of thousands of pioneers tell the story of the cost of this great journey west, a journey almost forgotten. Dust and sagebrush, tall grasses and giant forests try to steal and mask the last hints of the old trails. The traces of the wagon trains nearly lost. "170 years later, history buffs turned detectives have come to rediscover the trails.
I'm Dave Crevassier, crossing the backcountry of Nevada with a new team of pioneers searching for the old trails of the wagon trains.
I'm joining this team of history hunters from a unique group called Trails West.
Let's do a quick radio check.
Together, we will slowly cross a lonely wilderness. We'll literally walk in the tracks of the wagon trains and touch the pioneer signatures scratched into rock walls along the trail.
It's kind of a way of reliving history and seeing history in action. A lot of sections are basically pristine trail. It doesn't look much different than it did when the immigrants came through. Trying to locate the trails like solving a mystery.
We'll pore over the diaries of the immigrants and see how their words reveal the lost trails.
You can read the diary quotes in certain different places and know that right where you're standing, such and such happened.
You read the hardships that they're enduring.
This has been the saddest day of my journey. I counted on this day's drive, 367 dead oxen. There are many wagons abandoned.
We'll visit the springs that kept their livestock alive and hunt for the graves of those left behind and hear the stories that just flow out of these mountains.
One hill, we locked both wheels and put on ropes to let our wagons down. And where they let the wagons down is right over here. It's like the edge of a cliff.
These were ordinary people that decided to leave what they knew and go to the unknown.
It was one of the major migrations in human history.
Across the plains, over towering mountains, through the deserts, the migration rolled on. But it's been nearly 2 centuries, and long stretches of the roads the pioneers carved out of the wilderness are disappearing.
These trails are an important part of our history.
It's why groups like Trails West and the Oregon-California Trails Association are so important.
You're out hunting for history and with the hope that you can save history.
I've always had an interest in what's going on out in the world. When you have that kind of interest, then you start asking your questions, well, how did it get there? And that starts taking you back and you get hooked.
The volunteers hunt for the trails and then mark them before they disappear. All over the West, you'll find these sturdy signposts welded out of old railroad tracks.
We have over 700 markers now installed. We try to put markers at specific places where there's good diary references or there's something memorable to mark there.
Each marker quotes an immigrant diary, each a snapshot into the history of the West.
Those diary accounts attract people more and it makes it more meaningful.
Trees hundreds of feet high and 4, 5, 6.
The road becomes deep with fine sand before entering Long Valley.
We beheld a large valley spread out before us.
They would have crossed the lake.
And another shot rings out.
Somebody decided to go, others followed.
It's impossible to think of how they could do this.
When you're walking the trail, it's amazing what these people went through.
Drivers or hikers use guidebooks to get from one marker to the next. The top of the marker points in the direction of the trail.
So these trails are very important, and there's lots of them still left out there.
We think we know where the trails are, but in fact we're constantly improving our knowledge.
Don Buck was a busy history professor in Silicon Valley when he joined Trails West in 1980.
It's what historians try to do is preserve the past.
He has collected hundreds of diaries. He spends hours each day dissecting them, looking for clues.
My primary focus is trail description because I'm trying to find trails.
You drive along, here's a diary, it talks about this red bluff, and you look around and go down the road a little ways and bam, there's this red bluff. Or some of the diaries, they even made sketches. It looks the same today as it did then. Finding something out there that is mentioned in a diary is pretty special. Excites me, it really does. Seeing something from 170 years ago.
Here on this one stretch of the trail, you can actually see the ruts of the wagon wheels as they go up the grade here.
This land in Nevada's Black Rock Desert has been saved to preserve the old emigrant trail.
For people to see, to appreciate what immigrants went through.
Each mile we drive, we are reconnecting with our past. Trips like these are a staple of Trails West. Members are constantly researching the journals, repairing or adding markers, and bringing newcomers onto the old trails.
Some already have other interests, but others begin to think, well, I like the outdoors and hear about trails. And here's something they can jump into. And those are the people that Trails West attracts.
I want to be here, I want to see this. The trails are just littered with things they were throwing out. The animals couldn't pull it anymore, they were too weak. The West was just covered with what we call antiques now and very important stuff. One ranch in western Nevada, and here's a couple of wagon parts, parts of stoves. Susie, you got a copy?
It's not all wilderness. This tour of the Beckworth Trail passes right by the casinos and hotels of Sparks, Nevada. This trail, developed by Jim Beckworth, crossed one of the lowest passes in the Sierra.
Parallel with 395.
And became very popular, rolling right past his cabin, which remains standing. Beckworth, born to slaves at the turn of the century, was a legendary mountain man who carved trails out of the wilderness. Parts of this wagon road are now covered by lakes and freeways. The guides show novice historians the sections that survive.
You'll see the rut.
And all over, you will see the signs of this emigrant trail.
Most of the members obviously are history buffs. I feel like a kid on a field trip. You're actually out in the field.
This is a little chunk of special Nevada.
Every view that we look at is exactly what they saw.
Trails West was founded in 1970, and every year they welcome new members to the group, taking folks back out on the old emigrant trail. You can see where the Donner Party met their tragic fate. Discover signatures scratched on rock walls from the immigrants, marking their journey. You will travel through deep canyons and up fast-moving rivers, right atop the trails where the wagon trains once passed. Their mission, to pass the stories along to a new generation and install those distinctive trail markers, more than 700 put in so far in Idaho, Nevada, California, and Oregon. You can get all the details on their website, emigranttrailswest.org. I spent 5 days with the group in the middle of Nevada. No cell coverage, no internet, just pure wilderness. And folks that love to have fun and share their knowledge of history. Out here, it's all about our past, and there's a story around every bend.